to try, just because I know we have, 3 lightning talks of 5 minutes each, and that never, I'm not blaming anybody, but it's really difficult to give a 5-minute lightning talk and keep everybody on time. So I'm hoping we can sort of get through the beginning parts here. I think I recognize most everybody here. Just as an introduction in case, I'm now Gaffney. I'm Director of Data Computing at TAC, and I co-chair this with many of the other folks here in the room. Every month we do a nice set of presentations around data, but then also talk about what's going on in the hubs. And so I don't think we need to do around the room, but we can go ahead and get started on if there's what news there is coming from the hubs, how are things going, how's tricks. So Christine, you want to start with the West real quick?
Sure. Well, I can start with what happened most recently. So yes, and actually this is perfect we're on the call because it'll save me an email. So yesterday and today, actually, at the same time as this call, Sarah Stone is covering today. We in the West participated in the Hsi Stem Hub virtual residency on grantsmanship. Hsi Stem, you know what STEM stands for. HSI stands for Hispanic Serving Institutions. They're an NSF-funded initiative similar to the hubs, except they're not divided by census region. It's about what we would give to one hub covering the whole US, and there are a lot of HSIs. Oh yeah. And so we have partnered with the Hsi Stem Hub. We followed up from an event we did in September, which was 2 days on how do you teach data science and doing things with data to HSIs, a lot of community college instructors, and then teaching college instructors as well. And it was so rewarding. We said, let's keep working together. So long story long, we had our virtual workshop yesterday and today, and most of the participants this time around are in the other hubs, the South and the Northeast. And so I have Florence, one person who I wanted to put together an email with you and Katie, just to be in touch. She wants to partner on some outreach stuff for an upcoming proposal. And then for the South, I have 2 people who wanted an e-introduction. And so I'll be doing that as well. I hope that's okay. And I couldn't remember, didn't we say Puerto Rico belongs to everybody? It's not just that the South is closest, or I'm pretty sure at the beginning, Puerto Rico could work with anyone, but I'm still going to introduce the Puerto Rico crowd to the South Hub.
Thank you.
Holyoke's got the 2nd largest Puerto Rican population in the Northeast. So seriously, is there a way to get a link to that? HCC would be quite interested.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'll start with the ones that I promised, and I'll follow up with a few of you.
And that may be an interesting future. I don't know, we could do lightning talk or whether we could do a little, group workshop or something in this, but, talking about how the hubs can help support these folks, getting crossover between them, because, there's a lot of that is sort of needed. And I'd hate, we got a lot of capacity. It'd be really nice to be able to share and open, and also some really cool things that come out. Kelly Gaither's been doing some work with some of the folks. I can't remember the name of the small university, but it's one of the native universities in Hawaii, in Honolulu. And lots of really, really, really great stuff coming out of that, introducing people to data science and allowing them to see that they can do that. So good stuff. All right. Well, I guess I don't really have too much I could report from the South Hub because I haven't been able to make the South Hub meetings for a little while. So unfortunately, I think the usual suspects from there are not here today. So
hey, Niall, I'm here. You're right.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, this is Shannon. We actually canceled the last meeting so you're not missing it much. Like all the hubs, actively involved in the HDR workshop about a month ago and following up on the report out that. Also, now that is over and Renata's handed the leadership of the NCC over to John in the Midwest. I think we're working on the data up program that we have with Homeland Security. and other initiatives that we had underway within our region that are not worth going into right now. But excited you're all here. Thank you.
Good. Sorry about that. This is the problem with Hollywood Squares.
Nope.
It's hard to see who's here, and it moves around who's depending on who's muted and not muted on the left or on the right. So, yeah. Midwest Hub. Do we have any sort of updates coming there?
Yeah, we do. I put a link in the chat for people to check out if you haven't seen it already. We are getting ready to host a one-day meeting, and the details of that are there. It's the topic is big data promises and obstacles, agricultural data ownership and privacy. And so you see the lineup and the agenda we're working on. In fact, I was just working on it before I joined this meeting with the other organizers. And so organizing committee is me, Cynthia Parr from USDA, Aaron Bergstrom from University of North Dakota, and also now the Digital Spoke PI, Jason Capella, PepsiCo, and Phil Party of the University of Minnesota. He's an agroeconomist. And so we've done a few things on this topic. If you're interested in issues specifically around data ownership and privacy in the ag space, this would be a good event.
Very cool.
Otherwise, we've rescheduled, and people have probably seen that, the all hands meeting into October, and like optimistically, we expect to actually be there in person, which the whole idea seems
very weird right now.
very strange.
I know Supercomputing 20 is still supposed to happen. I think they're just insane for thinking that they can pull that one off. But who knows? There's also talk of a vaccine by August. So, all right, and then how about Northeast?
Okay, so this is Florence, and since I last spoke to you, I became the official executive director. I was interim.
Oh, I'll have to change your intro then.
It's all about the same. That became effective May 18th, so it's pretty fresh. But we've been super busy, and one of the things I'm going to present today is a rapid COVID award that we got to create a COVID information commons. Oops, sorry, that's spam. So a COVID information commons, and we're going to do a demo today, and I'm going to give you all a link to the demo with the password so that you can go in and try it out. And there's a feedback form on it because this is a soft launch, and we got the award the beginning of May. This is our soft launch, and we're supposed to launch the MVP the week of July 10th. And it has some powerful stuff, and which means it's kind of complex. And so we need to increase the user experience positiveness. So we're very busy with that, and it's by all the hubs, but we're kind of taking the lead on it. And so it's a lot of fun. John might talk about the ERN all hands meeting. That's next week. That's going to be a few days next week in Zoom enabled different segments. And we just found out that we're going to have a BD Hubs PI and ED an SF Seed Fund Steering Committee Chair meeting, probably one day in the September timeframe. So John McMullen just reached out to the EDs to ask them to try to coordinate. And then we just got our Seed Fund Steering Committee Chair onboarded a couple of weeks ago. And that's so we can figure out what to do with this $250,000 a year that we get for seed fund pilot programs. So that's pretty much it. John, do you want to add anything?
I could talk just briefly about the Eastern Regional Network all hands meeting. The Eastern Regional Network is a coalition of the willing across the northeastern states, starting in Delaware, which is almost northeast, up through Maine, which is solidly northeast, but stops short of Nova Scotia. And the idea is, how do you lower barriers to collaborative research across campuses within the region? And the barriers that we seek to lower are people. You know, how do you get facilitators to work across campuses? Compete resources. So how do you make it as easy to get to a resource on a different campus as it is to get to an edge roam wireless access today? and data. How do you seamlessly share data when you need to between collaborators or groups of collaborators across campus? We've been kind of beavering away at this for a couple of years. This is our second annual all hands, our first virtual all hands. And we'll be kind of covering all those topics in kind of little short sessions across the week.
Nice. All right. Well, that's all good stuff. It sounds like it's going to be a busy summer for everyone. I guess we don't have any updates right now on OSN. Nobody here, but or do you have anything, Christine? Or
Sure, just to say that it's rolling along. We continue to onboard use cases. We are just finishing the first 2 years of our funding, and we're hopeful. We're in talks with NSF. We're hopeful that we'll be allowed to expand some of that outreach. And let's see, just trying to say things with enough weasel words. We also had some proposals under review from partners who integrated their work into, or who hope to integrate what they're doing in with OSN. So I think it's been a really positive outgrowth of the work of the hubs, as well as in this next phase, we would really want to double down and partner more with the hubs to do outreach, to find projects that need something like this, especially so they can put most of the money on their award towards their time and their scientific needs and not reinvent the wheel.
sounds good. Which I think carries right into sort of the next, which is any updates on sort of outreach or other parts that we're doing around data here. And I mean, I think that may be something we need to focus a little bit towards the fall once getting OSN and other, I think, you know, the minority serving universities and community colleges and data science around that would also be a good thing to sort of look at outreach in the coming year, and maybe using this as an opportunity to start to bring those folks in to see the opportunities and the collaborations that we can build out on this. So
on that, I'd like to add 2 points.
Sure.
And one is HSI was Hispanic serving institutions.
It's
right?
Hispanic, okay, in particular, yeah. But
is it? No, I'm just saying, because I want to share something in particular. There's a young man, younger than I am anyway, that's getting his PhD in neuroscience at Princeton, who reached out to me, and he actually teaches a neuroscience class online to Hispanic-speaking students in his spare time while he's getting his PhD in neuroscience.
Sure, because why not?
Why not? You know, brilliant people, that's what they do. Well, what else can I do? I'm so bored. And so we're working with the New York Hall of Science to see if we can create some kind of program. He already did it with, I think, Harvard and some groups around there. So maybe there's something cool we can do with that. Yeah. He speaks, you know, Spanish as a native language. So that's a very cool idea we can think about. And then the other thing is there's this carpentries organization that some of the hubs have been partnering with. I'm brand new at this. But one of the things we're thinking about is leveraging, they have a library carpentry, they have a data science carpentry, a software carpentry, and a library carpentry. And we're thinking of maybe trying to leverage the library carpentry to get to underserved communities. And so we're going to talk with our New York Hall of Science friends. They're in Corona, Queens. If anybody knows Long Island, you know, Corona, Queens is like, you know, 93%, you know, underserved population. So we're going to see if maybe we can leverage the carpentries work in that direction to get to underserved communities.
Sure. Maybe I can just tangent off that real quick. So we've been working with the South Hub, specifically Renzi, on how to leverage what has been done by library carpentry, but reimagining it for the stakeholders that are more typical of the hub. So instead of a wholly librarian audience, people that are CI people or scientists themselves, postdocs, grad students. And Chris Erdman is at Renzi, and he headed up library carpentry. And so we've got some stuff that we're trying to tee up for this coming year in the West Hub that'll be based on that. We should definitely work together.
That sounds great. Why don't I send you an email and we can have a call? Anyone else you want to pull in? Because Katie and I are still trying to figure it out. I actually audited a Train the Trainers the other day just to get a feel for what they do. And I was pleasantly surprised. So yeah, why don't I send you an email and let's see. especially if it's going to be virtual, it doesn't really matter what region you're in. Like, you know, are you on the International Space Station or on the Earth? Like, those are the 2 categories right now, I think. So while we're here, maybe we can work together. Thank you, Christine.
Excellent.
Works better when I'm not on mute. There's maybe another add-on to that. I'm a co-PI with Carol Johnson, who now you may have gotten to know. She's now part of TAC on something called ESAP, or Expanding Computer Science Education. They're working mainly at the K through 12 level. It's something like 40 of the 50 states, and are working largely on driving policy and driving computer science education. And part of their theme is how about we do DEI at the beginning as opposed to an add-on, but that might also be another channel to work with.
Okay, when you're ready to talk more about that, I do diversity and inclusion consulting on the side. I have been for quite a while. So if I can help you, when you mean diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes, but
okay.
that was maybe the real dimension is there a way to use the curriculum that you and Christine just talked about.
Yeah, but it's kind of a combination. To be sensitized and then understand how you can get it. What I find is as you decide to serve certain communities, you have to understand how.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Very, very, very much. And that might be an interesting, I'm setting up workshops, it almost sounds like in my head, but if we could get a few people from these different communities to talk to that aspect of it, which is the hardest thing to do, is to get that buy-in from the community to support people doing things. And that often means working locally on information that impacts them on a daily basis. And so how that may be a matchmaking sort of thing that this and other groups can do to try and bring the right data to the right data scientists, to the right communities, so that they see, yes, I can do this and really change the world around me, which is important right now in many ways. Yeah, I can talk to Carol and other folks as well if I see them in person ever again. It's sort of the problem when you got 185 people all on Zoom, you forget half of them because you don't see them daily.
I see Carol's porch a lot these days.
Yeah, but might be good to get her and maybe Rosie or some other folks to talk about what's going on in that area, in sort of the Texas angle of the Hispanic community in the Valley and all that. So, all right. Well, I think that gives us some good ideas for more things to do in the fall, which is good. But we've sort of gone 23 minutes here, and I did want to make sure that we had enough time for all 3 of these talks and apparently even a demo. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that. And so the first presentation that we have is by Peter Rose and Ilya, I knew I was going to say something when I said Zaslavsky. My tongue just gets tied up around Z's and L's. Yeah. Anyway, sorry about that. I have the name Niall Gaffney. I'm used to it being mangled as well. So, but they are going to be talking about the structural bioinformatics lab work there, the work that they're doing around COVID-19. Peter's working in sort of the structural bioinformatics area, where he does a lot of work around sort of modeling the proteins and other aspects of, I've got to switch to that window, other aspects of sort of drug discovery and other key facets of what we're very interested in right now. And Ilya works in is the director of spatial information systems at the University of California, San Diego, where he works on many different sort of spatial information pieces of all of this. And they're going to talk to us about COVID-19 net and what they're doing right now. So I will turn it over to, I believe Peter's talking and Ilya's doing the slides.
All right.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we both present. Thanks for the introduction. First, I want to thank Christine for inviting us to the Data Hubs meeting. It sounds really interesting what you guys are doing, and hopefully maybe we find some connections, along the way as we present here. So we will talk about our effort to develop a heterogeneous network of COVID-19 data. So I'm Peter Rose. As mentioned, I run the structural bioinformatics lab, so I'm more on the bio side, and Ilya worked more on the geographical side of things. So this was a good project where we can really merge different disciplines together. And the way this happened is through a grant that we have from the NSF called the NSF Convergence Accelerator. So we just finished a planning grant a few days ago. And the idea of this open knowledge network is to integrate data from multiple disciplines together. You have all those data silos, and how can we connect them together? So the NSF funded this project, but the idea is that each project team needs to span multiple disciplines and multiple organizations. So for example, our collaborations is with UCSD, University of Texas Health, and the Pangeo project at NCAR as an example. So this is our project called Conquer, and here we're trying to bridge three disciplines. On the left-hand side, we have biomedicine and health data, and we are not starting from scratch. So at UCSD, we have worked on a project called DataMed, which is a discovery engine for life science data set. It's basically like a PubMed, but this is like a discovery engine for life science data sets, contains about 2.3 million data sets. Then on the other hand, Ilya worked on a project called Data Discovery Studio, where basically have geoscience data set, also about 1.7 million data sets, and they're basically all kind of data sets that have a geolocation with it. And we also work with NCAR, which provided climate data. So basically we want to see how we can connect all those different data sources together so you can run a query across multiple disciplines. So that's what Conquer is about. Now, the Conquer phase 1 has stopped, and we are applying now for Conquer phase 2. But in the meantime, we got a RAPID grant from the NSF, and that also focuses on a knowledge network, but specifically for COVID-19, where we can integrate multiple heterogeneous data like the ones shown here. So on the left-hand side, this is a cathedral in Sao Paulo. Here we have a cathedral, and actually the other way around. This is a cathedral in Milan. This is a cathedral in Sao Paulo. How are they connected? They're probably connected through some air travel. Here we see a piece of a genome from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We see some repurposing of drugs, PPEs. This is a 3D protein structure of the spike protein. So how can we connect this all together, and make sense out of that? So that's what we're trying to do. So we're working not alone. So there are at least 3 groups involved here. So in blue, this is us, UCSD. So in any of those spheres, anything that has a blue shade in it, that's something we involved in that. So Ilya is looking, for example, at population characteristics. We're looking at health data. I'm working more on the biomedical side, so I'm looking at virus strains and so on. We're looking at environmental factors. Then colleagues from UC San Francisco, they are looking really just in the bio area, like genes and proteins and drugs and so forth. And then there's another RAPID grant award to UC Santa Barbara, shown in green here, and they're focusing more on supply chain and transportation. So the idea is those 3 networks, we want to integrate them into an open knowledge network that can be used for forecasting, developing models, developing dashboards, and so forth. So our project basically just started like 2 weeks ago, so we don't have much yet, but I will show you a little bit what we are trying to do here. So for our part, we are trying to link basically 3 things together. One, we have the host, which in our case, the human being, a host for the COVID disease. Then we have the pathogen, which is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and everything else is environment in which the host and the pathogen lives. And some of the data we want to integrate, this is not a complete list. We have outcomes like confirmed cases, death, and so on. We have patient data like demographics, not for specific patients, but for patient groups. Then we have data about the pathogen and virus strains. We can include data from previous outbreaks to see what we can learn from that. And then there are other factors like weather, transportation, and social distancing, and so forth. So how can we bring this all together? So as I said, we just started this project, and we are presenting our data in a knowledge graph where we link different nodes together. And right now this is pretty sparse. We don't have much yet, but basically what this shows on the left-hand side, those are all the geolocations starting at the world level. We break down the world into UN regions, which are basically continents and subcontinents and so forth. Then we have countries. The countries are subdivided in admin 1 zones, which are states or provinces. Then we have the admin 2 zones, which are counties and cities and so forth. So basically we have mapped the entire world up to cities, up to 1,000 citizens. And so that's basically the knowledge graph that represents the Earth. And we will go even deeper, maybe to a zip code level and census tract level, but we are not there yet. Then on the right-hand side, I show a little bit about the biology of COVID-19. So first of all, we have cases that have been reported in different areas. So you see reported in those are the different areas where we find cases of this outbreak. This outbreak is related to a specific organism, that's SARS-CoV-2, which has multiple strains. They are linked to publication. We know what the genome is. We know what the genes are. We know what the proteins are. The strains are also linked to specific location. Those arrows are missing in this graph here. So this is just the beginning. So the idea is we will integrate more data, but it will always be integrated into geolocations, which are shown on the left here. So this is an early version of that knowledge graph. And instead of showing you the picture, let me show you a live graph. So our graph is represented in a database system called Neo4j. It's a graph-based data management system here. And here you see just a small view of the entire graph here. So what we're seeing here, first of all, over here, this node in this light blue color, this is a human being. That's the host of the disease. And here we have the virus. The human carries this virus. This virus has many strains, which are the little bubbles around here that are moving around here. Those are different strains.
Peter, sorry to interrupt, but I think you're just sharing your browser at this point, so we can't see the Neo4j graph.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Let me see.
I just noticed you were circling around a very white part of the slide. And
yeah, let's see. Why don't I share everything?
You probably need to unshare and then just reshare the whole desktop.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, so this is Neo4j. So here we see this is the SARS virus, which has different strains, and this beige color here. We have the human being, which is the host. And then the genome was published. This is for the first case in Wuhan, where they actually determined the genome. And interestingly, this genome came already out in January of this year, and the data for that were already collected. Actually, you could see that on the bottom here on December 5th, which is interesting. So they knew very early on, what's going on here. So this represents the first genome. That genome has various genes in green here, and those genes are expressed into proteins, and you have heard about the spike protein. That's this red part that you always see in TV around the virus. That's the spike protein. It's this one here. And that interacts with various human proteins shown on the right-hand side. One of them is angiotensin 2, which is this node right here. That's basically how the virus gets entry into the human. On the other hand, then for each strain has various mutations. They are listed here, and this is a specific mutation found in Singapore. So you see how we link together information about location, specific virus strains. We link that back to to the genome, to the protein. So this is just a small view of the whole graph. So it's much larger. So right now it contains about 460,000 nodes and about 800,000 relationships. So again, this is just a beginning of a larger prototype. And I'm not sure. Can you see back to my slides? Can you see them now?
No, it's still the Neo4j browser.
Okay. Let's see here.
Yeah.
You see it now? Okay. Now my slides don't advance. Okay, so here's an example of a study we did with this knowledge graph, So in this panel D, those are where each node in this beige color, that is a person, actually a person that lives in Sao Paulo, but they visited Italy, they actually visited Milan and caught the virus here, a specific strain A2A. And then they traveled back home to Sao Paulo. And then that led to a community spread, which is shown in level in panel C, where now you have people in Sao Paulo, they all carry this A2A strain. So that's an example how we can visualize this in a knowledge network. And similarly, that same strain is found in San Francisco and also in San Diego. So that's just a small use case how you might use such a knowledge graph. So
Excuse me, Pete, is that real or is that hypothetical? How you plan?
No. This is real data. Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I know a PI. He's the dean of the engineering school at Princeton that got a rapid COVID regarding mutations, and he's looking for friends to meet. So I'd like to introduce. I don't know if you know Vince Poor, but I can connect you with him.
Yeah, that'd be good if you could put something in the chat or send me an email. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then that comes actually to my next slide here. So we're trying to crowdsource data for this project. We don't have the expertise and data sets, for all the various different areas. So we're actively looking for collaborators who could contribute the expertise and data sets that we can feed into our knowledge graph. And then once it's in the knowledge graph, we can create infographics like the one I just showed you about this community spread, various visualization, analysis, and hopefully also forecast. So right now we have a group of students working on this as volunteers, but we want to expand that to the community. So we want to make it really easy for everybody to contribute data. And first of all, the way we create our knowledge graph, it's all based on open access data. We don't want somebody send us a data file where we don't really know where it came from. Everything is based on publicly available data. So that's one thing, because we're creating what we call an open knowledge network. We don't want to have any proprietary data. We also don't like the idea of hand manipulating data. So going from the raw data, we have workflows to automatically create curated data, and that is done through Jupyter Notebooks, since many people know how to use them and they're great for data cleanup. So we can automate the data cleanup through Jupyter Notebooks. And they're all open source, they're all in GitHub, so it's completely a reproducible workflow. And those Jupyter Notebooks, they create just simple CSV files. They represent the nodes and relationships, which are then uploaded into the knowledge graph. And this happens every night at midnight Pacific time. We run this workflow every day, get new data, because many of the data sources are updated on a daily basis. So we rerun that workflow every night and create the updated knowledge graph from that. So you have always fresh data. Creating this knowledge graph, there are a lot of problems with that. For example, a lot of data are in free text that causes problems. There are ambiguities, for example, dealing with location data such as Orange County, Florida versus Orange County, California. Often scientists are not specific enough to define where the data are coming from. And I don't want to go through all the roadblocks here, but there are many. There are data gaps, there are missing data, and so forth. And so one thing early on we thought about is interoperability for knowledge graphs, because it doesn't help if we create a knowledge graph, but that is again just another silo. So for example, for all our biological data, we use what is called curates or compact URIs. That means if you have a specific identifier for a gene or protein, etc., you have a compact ID, which consists of a prefix and then an accession number. Those are linked to persistent URLs, which eventually can be resolved to a specific information resource. And the way it works, for example, if we have a protein here, that protein YP so-and-so comes from NCBI protein, and using identifiers.org, if you plug in this ID here, it will resolve to the specific data set. So basically that way we exactly define where all the data come from. And this leans on a model developed by Lawrence Berkeley Labs. They call it this BioLink model. And I want to skip over. This is just an example how we use those curates to make it interoperable. And So I showed you this graphic viewer, which is called the Neo4j Browser, where you can graphically browse this network, which is nice, but it's not really reproducible. But fortunately, there's a plugin for Jupyter Notebook, so you can run a query. Here's an example of a query that's using what's called the Cypher query language. You can run that in a Jupyter Notebook. For example, here we list all the different proteins. On the right-hand side, you see the virus with the different components, and here we list all the different components of this virus as an example here. So it's very nicely integrates with Jupyter Notebooks. And now we have, a reproducible pipeline to create a knowledge graph, a reproducible way of analyzing the data. And again, all of this you can put in a Git repository. It's completely reproducible by anyone. Yeah, and with that, we're going to switch over to Ilya to talk more about the geoscience.
Sorry. We need to sort of, unfortunately, I think we need to sort of be able to move on a little bit. These were supposed to be 5-minute talks.
Oh, there should be 5 minutes. I thought they're 15 minutes.
Oh, sorry, that's my fault. I hadn't.
Oh, okay, because we still have 2 more to go. So if we could just hit the high points. I'm sorry to pull the rug out on you, Ilya, but I'm sure there are people that are going to have to go at the top of the hour. So I want to make sure that Florence and Christine have their opportunities as well.
Sure. Okay. So I'll skip this slide. You can see my screen, can you?
Yes.
Location is an important issue because this is typically the only way we can connect data. We have engaged some students, and we also work with San Diego County Health and Human Services and develop dashboards for them. So I was actually going to show you very briefly of how we have a dashboard that shows cases by San Diego County by zip codes, and you can look at health indicators such as different types of diseases, at age structure, social, and like people with no insurance. And you can also connect from any of these zip codes to a knowledge graph. And this is done via Jupyter Notebook, where we essentially pass the parameters from the dashboard to the notebook. So you can see that we get the zip code here, and then we can run something such as run some queries against the knowledge graph or update knowledge graph and so on. So if we do that, then we'll be able to connect to the knowledge graph that Peter just described and start querying that. And the problem is that here we're talking at the level of zip codes, and the knowledge graph doesn't yet have information about that. So we have information from Johns Hopkins and similar worldwide kind of sources, where San Diego is just a name of something. While if you look at it at San Diego locally, it's just one of 18 municipalities within San Diego County and has fairly well-defined boundaries. So that makes it difficult to connect. This is one of the dashboards that we have. We have another set of dashboards which I'm gonna share with you on the chat. And here, what you can do, you can look at multiple factors that we're entering into the knowledge graph simultaneously, and figure out which areas are problematic on multiple indicators. So that's, for example, San Diego, and you can look at people who have, let's say, or areas that have higher percentage of people with no health insurance, and with heart disease, with diabetes, and so on. So these are the problem areas, and then you can launch Jupyter Notebooks and connect with the knowledge graph from here as well. So an additional set of projects that students are working on, and of course we need a lot of free workforce to populate the graph. So they're working on location subgraphs and on dashboards on proteins, but also on schema.org, because that is a useful common vocabulary that we can use across multiple graphs. And you may have seen the announcement from OSTP that expects Covet data to be schema.org marked up. So we have a group of, we've actually have some experience with schema.org markup. We have about 900,000 records about geoscience data sets that are picked up by Google. And when you can search, when you search Google dataset search, it's very likely that you hit Data Discovery Studio on multiple things. So that's the work we've been doing for the county. And actually one issue that may be of interest to many of you, people have been talking about fair data management that has not really applied yet to knowledge graphs, but the number of knowledge graphs is proliferating. And as I mentioned, we have a knowledge graph that works at the level of, well, that goes down to counties, but then we have additional knowledge graph that would be for San Diego specifically. How do we query across of them, given that some identifiers may not match, definitions of the variables would be not identical, and also we may expect multiple knowledge graphs to exist at this level. So that brings up a question of how we can have a registry of knowledge graphs so that we can find them. What would be a consistent way to describe them, perhaps with some meta knowledge graphs or with schema.org descriptions of what's inside? How we make them accessible via standard APIs? How we can make them interoperable so that from a dashboard like that, we can query across different knowledge graphs and they talk to each other and produce some result. And how we establish common vocabulary. Again, it can be schema.org based, or it could be something else. So on that, I'll finish. Thanks.
I have two quick questions. One is this just COVID related, this registry of knowledge graphs, or is this like ubiquitous, what you're thinking?
It should be ubiquitous, but Covet is a good starting point because people have been actively working on that.
Okay, because this could be something that we could connect people through the COVID information commons I'm talking about next. Okay.
Yes, I'm look forward to your talk.
And is this based on your rapid or your HDR phase 1 or phase 2, or is this just you're doing it anyway?
Well, the slide about fair knowledge graphs, it's just what it is. It's a slide.
Okay, got it. Okay, great.
No, that's all great stuff. We should probably circle back on some of this when we have a full hour on parts of this. So look forward to hearing more this in the future. So rather than rambling on, I will let Florence go ahead. You're next on the schedule, and I think we all sort of know who you are. So
okay,
let you and your azaleas take it away.
Yeah, liking my azaleas, wish they still look that way. So let's see, can you see this? It looks like a big COVID thing.
I can see a pencil on a white screen.
Okay.
Yeah, you're sharing whiteboard instead of
screen sharing is pause. My screen sharing is sharing. Okay.
You're sharing a whiteboard and not your screen?
When I say share my screen and then I go to that screen, it actually...
You might just share the entire desktop. I find that it gets confused.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a second. Oh, I'm trying to share my desktop. Where is that? It doesn't give me that as an option. Okay. Let me show my, that's really weird. Okay. I've never had this happen before. Okay. Live and learn. Can you see this now?
Perfect.
No. Okay. So this is the COVID Information Commons, and this is based on a rapid that we got at the Northeast Big Data Hub to work with the other hubs. And the idea is to create an open resource regarding NSF-funded research addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, starting with the rapid awards. So the idea is that PIs would use it, NSF people, presidents of universities who want to see how they're doing versus other universities on getting COVID funding and things like that. And there are two basic ways we have of searching at this point. One is this really cool COVID Research Explorer tool, which is actually based on Neo4j Explorer, if you're familiar with that. And it is actually an internal NSF tool they've exposed to us to use on this COVID Information Commons. Can you see this map?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, great. My screen's getting funky. Hang on a second. Okay. So this map actually is kind of a topographical map. It's machine learning based. So it's looking at all the COVID rapid awards and then looking at what categories they go into. Then you could look at what they call a tree map, which is kind of like the periodic table of the elements. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Very interesting. And so this is kind of by thematic areas. And then you can also see a list of the awards. And it's not the easiest thing on the planet to use. So we're looking for input on the user interface. So as an example, you can see this query over here. Do you see this, fun little terminology, COVID-19 or COVID-19? So these are actually the searches they have to use to find the COVID awards in the NSF database because they have a data cleansing problem. So there are actually misspellings in some of the awards. So this is how they actually find them all. And then,
COVID-19.
I know. Well, so they had to actually query their database to realize they weren't getting all the awards because they have to use these other words. So they did that. But then let's say that you wanted to look at, these types of things and you wanted to add and use Boolean algebra mutation like my friend at Princeton wants to do. Then you put that in and then you analyze again. And then it comes back with a much smaller number. And then you can look at a tree map of it. And you can actually see what universities are working in these different areas. So this is one of the tools, and I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because my laptop is misbehaving and I have to put it back under control. Okay, so that's one of the ways you can get into the data. And this is an open source tool. It actually goes against the entire NSF database, but we're not telling everybody that, but they can know that because it's all public data, but we're starting, we're using it first for COVID and coronavirus longitudinally. The other tool that you can use is we've actually just done, quick searches through the simple search mechanism. So if you want to look for COVID-19 awards in the biological sciences, as an example, this will bring you to the simple search so you can, search for them. And then what we're looking to do is to actually create another view. And let me see, I'm probably not going to be able to share it and find it, but another view that gives you an easier way to look at all the information about an award. And it's brought to you by the 4 big data hubs. And so what I'd like to do is to send to the CI list the actual, the URL for this with the password and ID so you guys can try it, and ladies. And there's a feedback mechanism on the bottom of the website. We're in soft launch timing. I'm looking for input by June 20th, and we're supposed to launch the MVP the week of July 10th, and I would love your input on it. The other thing we're going to be doing is sending the PIs like you, Peter, for the COVID Rapids, a survey to ask you for additional information you would like us to populate through this website. So like some of those cool demos, I'm thinking, oh, my eyes were like twinkling while you guys were presenting your stuff. It would be so cool to be able to link to that from the website. So we're going to send an email through the program officers to all the rapid COVID PIs. There's like over 500 of them now. And we'll see what we get back and then see how to organize it on the website. But we would love to say, here's their project website. They have this on GitHub. We'll see what we get back. And I'm thinking if you have a graph of knowledge graphs, a registry regarding COVID, that would be so cool to include on this COVID information commons. Ta-da, that's it.
Excellent. That's fantastic. I might steal a few of those, or steal those the login information and get it to a few folks who are doing some of the viz work at TAC, see if there's other decision support things that we can do. Or
that would be great.
So
I'll send Christine.
I hope everybody else can do that. Excuse me?
I sent you the email, and you can send it to all your friends.
Okay. I'm just warning you, you may hear from other folks. So, but that's
excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, Christine.
And if I could ask you, Chris, to go ahead and share the slides and just move ahead to slide 2, and I'll just get talking. Thank you for doing that again. So I've been involved in an initiative I'm really excited to tell you about. I wish, we didn't have this COVID thing, but there are some silver linings. I'd already been involved in GoFair for a while, which you might know what FAIR stands for: findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. Ilya and Peter mentioned this concept. GoFair is an initiative where the Go stands for global and open. And they're a companion organization that's synergistic with CODATA and RDA. And I've got actually a graphic at the end that shows you a bit about where they lie. One of the hallmarks of GoFair is that they create implementation networks. So they do things like take the RDA guidelines and outputs and try to put them into practice, for example. They're very big on promoting machine actionable data, the idea that this is a common denominator for fair data. If your computer can read the data, then people probably can too. And about March 15th, the Virus Outbreak Data Network was established. One of the founders of GoFair, Baron Mons, his background is in malaria research in Africa. And so he had this idea that we shouldn't just be reactive to COVID. This should be something that you know, can survive and help us in other crises. We don't want COVID to survive, just the VODAN. The next slide, please. So a lot going on this slide. This is one of the pilots underway by VODAN. A lot of the activity you see and a lot of the demos you'll see, especially in the early weeks of the crisis, we're all about the bottom left. You know, how can we parse journals, right? Everyone was working on that. But we're trying to remember that the eventual goal is to get up to this top right. How do policymakers, how do decision makers figure out, yeah, stop giving hydroxychloroquine to people, or humidity is not going to matter until we have herd immunity. You know, how do you get to what they call the trusted world of corona? And so this is a pilot underway that tries to collect not just all of the data that's out there that's related to COVID-19 and related pandemics, but also incorporates that with the FAIR data points, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, puts that in a place where it can be annotated and then forwarded on in a much better view to be used by analysis platforms. In this case, there's one called Euretos, which is a spin-off of some other earlier efforts by the same partners. So next slide, please. So VODAN Africa. VODAN Africa is an offshoot of the VODAN Implementation Network. A lot of us, you know, we don't have people to consult in our families who've lived through a pandemic. This is very new to us. But for Africans, they lived through Ebola not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And so they are well aware that this is something that they need to think about and use for whatever the next health crisis is. What happened with Ebola is that the infrastructure came in with the people, and then everything, including the data, were taken back to the Western countries. So they don't even have data about what happened, you know, to them. And so VODAN is being set up differently. It's for Africa by African partners. And it's a lot of people working at country levels, health ministries, universities, foundational support from the Phillips Foundation, and with sponsorship from different governments. The three projects, and especially as relate to, I think, our interests, people on the call, they're the first to do widespread metadata for machines workshop, this idea that FAIR data is machine actionable data. They've also launched a Train the Trainers program for creating a data steward workforce. They found that there aren't enough people, just as we don't have in the US or the EU or Australia and New Zealand don't have enough data stewards. They definitely don't either. And then also setting up FAIR data points, which are places that algorithms can query for metadata and summary data. And the idea being that these are infrastructure left behind for future crises. Another key reason for doing the FAIR data points is that so much of the response is about regions. You know, it's not like rain that falls evenly. It's happening in clusters. And I've got a few quotes sprinkled in from some of the partners in VODAN. So next slide, please, Chris. So this is just a quick look at the participants: Tunisia in the north, Nigeria in the west, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia in the east, and then Zimbabwe in the south. And they definitely have commonalities in their challenges, but also some very different things, especially if you're looking at Tunisia, which is right there on the border with Libya. Next slide, please. And so we had a COVID-19 and FAIR data webinar that Peter and Ilya were part of, and the VODAN Africa one kind of maybe like this this webinar today had so much more we wanted to dig into. We went and did another 3-part series. This is a picture of Vice Chancellor Mapeza from Kampala International University in Uganda. He's the chair of VODAN Africa. These webinars were all recorded and are there if you're interested. Just a few highlights. You know, we think the internet's unreliable for us, but it's so unreliable in some parts of Africa. There's no idea of you can just go and work from home. Tunisia and other African nations as well are trying to help people who are used to going out and getting literally the hand to mouth, right, their daily income. And they have a ton of people who, you know, are there seeking asylum, that aren't registered anywhere, that are even more at risk than before. And then, of course, you've got Libya on their border where people need to cross over and work, but also sometimes some of the violence gets too close. Some countries, Liberia, who's not mentioned as an official partner, but has partners there, is also looking to track alcohol abuse and domestic violence alongside the COVID infections because they're seeing some correlations. And they urged everyone, as they're thinking about these data infrastructures we're building, you know, what is going to come after COVID, and let's make sure that we have the data needed to respond to that. Another comment came from Liberia that, you know, whereas a lot of us are at our wits' end with our kids home and doing school from home, in Liberia, the kids go home and there's no laptop, no internet, and so there's no schooling happening. Kenya raised, you know, what it's like to try and manage an outbreak in a slum where people aren't able to wash their hands. And then another thing that was a commonality that we take for granted that I believe is on the, some people put on the list of human rights along with water and electricity, having unique IDs. It's very hard to have electronic health records without those. But on the positive side, we had partners, some of these are from some of the data stewards, talking about how the data collected will save lives and the wonderful network that was created as a part of this. Next slide. So this will be in the slides that can be shared. This is just an example of a fair data endpoint exposing these health records required from the World Health Organization on COVID. Next slide. And so this is really the last, second, penultimate slide. You know, on the positive side, it reminded me how much easier it can be to implement cutting-edge systems and processes when you don't have legacy systems to deal with. You know, Ethiopia is far ahead of some of the other nations in what they have with electronic health records, but it can make it very difficult to do some of these new things. And I think this is also why here in the US, we will be looking to Africa to see what they did with the metadata for machine workshops, how they train people to set up fair data points on their own. And we'll be looking at the playbook they created for training of trainers and adapting that. The other obvious takeaway is we take so much for granted. You know, gone are the days here when we optimize graphics and video, but that was a very necessary step for everything that we've produced for VODAN Africa, is to go back and make sure that it can work on a mobile phone at low bandwidth. And so it's not wasted time if you want to still do that. And then lastly, to set up something like VODAN Africa is as simple and as hard as finding key individuals who are passionate about doing that. And all of the projects we talked about, I think, are the same way and will be the same way years from now. Success depends on individuals. So with the last slide, there's a couple links if you want to find out more. If you are interested in this topic, I can't recommend enough joining the Midas Network. They have a really interesting webinar coming up in a few weeks. And with that, a couple minutes over. Sorry about that, Niall.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I was just going to jump in here and say we've had a few people that had to leave at 3. I think if people want to sit and discuss things further on this Friday afternoon, I'm willing to hang around for a little bit here. But if not, I want to thank everybody for presenting 3 very interesting and all actually somewhat related talks about how we are doing, improving things here in this COVID world, but also hopefully how we can take what we're learning from doing all this and extend it onward. I was just, as you were going through the slides about the African countries, was thinking about, you know, the same sort of problems on the Navajo Nation right now. You know,
absolutely.
I mean, there's just that all of this stuff is interrelated and can be applied in places all around, and very important for that. So, so thank you, everybody. And if we want to have sort of a little question and answer discussions here, feel free. If not, we can stop playing Hollywood Squares for a little while and get started on the weekend.